There are certain things you learn to ignore when you live alone. The sound of pipes inside the walls. The occasional noise outside. A branch scraping against your window. You tell yourself there's always a reasonable explanation. But sometimes there isn't. This happened to a 24-year-old man named Daniel, who had recently moved into a small house on the edge of town. And the strangest part of his story wasn't what he saw. It was what he realized after he had already gone to bed.
Daniel's new house wasn't particularly large. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a narrow living room facing the road. Directly across from the house was another property. It looked abandoned. The grass was overgrown, the windows were dirty, and nobody seemed to live there. Daniel had never seen a car parked outside. He assumed it had been empty for years. On his 4th night there, Daniel woke up at exactly 2:17 in the morning. He wasn't sure what had woken him. At first, he thought it was the rain. Then he heard it again. 3 quiet knocks. Not on his front door, not on a window. They sounded like they were coming from somewhere inside the house. Daniel sat up in bed and listened. Nothing. He waited for another sound. Nothing came. Eventually, he convinced himself it had been the heating system. The next night, it happened again. 3 knocks. This time, Daniel got out of bed. He walked slowly into the hallway. The house was completely silent. He checked the kitchen, the living room, the bathroom. Nothing. Then he noticed something through the living room window. The abandoned house across the road had a light on. Just one light. Upstairs. Daniel stared at it for several seconds. Then the light went out. Daniel told himself that someone must have entered the house. Maybe a squatter. Maybe a maintenance worker. Maybe the property wasn't abandoned after all. He went back to bed. But around 2:20, he looked toward his bedroom window. There was someone standing outside. Daniel froze. The figure was completely still. He couldn't see the person's face. Just a dark silhouette behind the curtain. Daniel reached for his phone. And when he looked back, the figure was gone. Daniel called the police. They searched the property. Nobody was there. No footprints. No broken windows. Nothing. The next morning, Daniel spoke to his neighbor. That's when he learned something disturbing. The house across the road hadn't been occupied for almost 6 years. But that wasn't the worst part. The neighbor asked Daniel one question. Did you see someone in the upstairs window? Daniel nodded. The neighbor went quiet. Then he said, "You're not the first person who's seen him." Daniel moved out 2 weeks later. He never found out who had been standing outside his bedroom window. But according to him, the 3 knocks never happened again after he left. The second story happened to a college student named Marcus. Marcus worked the closing shift at a small grocery store. Most nights were boring. He locked the doors around midnight, counted the register, and walked across the parking lot to his car. Until one Thursday night, he noticed a car that shouldn't have been there. It was an old, dark sedan, parked at the far end of the lot. No headlights, no interior light, nobody visible inside. Marcus assumed it belonged to a customer. But when he got into his car, the sedan turned its headlights on. Marcus looked toward it. The headlights immediately turned off. Marcus started driving home. A few seconds later, he noticed the same sedan behind him. He changed lanes. The sedan changed lanes. He turned onto another street. The sedan followed. Marcus started getting nervous. He decided not to drive home. Instead, he headed toward a gas station that stayed open all night. When Marcus pulled into the gas station, the sedan continued past him. Marcus sighed with relief. He got out of his car and went inside. The cashier asked him if everything was okay. Marcus said yes. Then the cashier looked through the window. His expression changed. He pointed toward Marcus's car. "Is that your friend?" Marcus turned around. Nobody was standing near his car. But there was something written on the driver's window. 3 words. "I saw you." Marcus called the police. They checked the parking lot. The sedan was gone. The writing on the window was gone too. Marcus thought that was the end of it, until he checked his phone. He had received a voicemail. The voicemail had been recorded 20 minutes earlier. It was just one sentence. A man's voice quietly said, "You should have gone home." The final story is the kind that makes you check your locks twice. It happened to a woman named Emily. Emily lived alone in a second-floor apartment. She had never experienced anything unusual there. Until one night, she came home from work and noticed something was different. Her apartment door was locked. Everything looked normal. But when Emily entered, she immediately noticed that one of the kitchen chairs had been moved. She thought maybe she'd forgotten. Then she noticed the bathroom door was slightly open. She always kept it closed. Emily stood completely still. She listened. Nothing. She walked through every room. The bedroom was empty. The bathroom was empty. The kitchen was empty. Then she reached the hallway closet. The door was closed. Emily stared at it. Something inside the closet made a tiny sound, like fabric moving. She immediately stepped backward. She didn't open it. Instead, she quietly left the apartment and called the police from downstairs. 2 officers arrived. They entered the apartment. They searched every room. Nothing. Eventually, one officer opened the closet. It was empty. Emily began to feel embarrassed. Maybe she'd imagined the sound. Maybe she was simply tired. Then, one officer noticed something strange. The closet had a small ventilation panel at the back, and the the screws holding it in place were loose.
The officers removed the panel. Behind it was a narrow maintenance space connecting several apartments. Someone could crawl through it, and someone had. Inside the space, police found an old blanket, empty food containers, and a phone charger. Someone had apparently been hiding there. They never found out who. But Emily remembered something. 3 days earlier, she had complained to her landlord that she kept hearing footsteps inside her walls. The landlord told her it was probably the building settling. Emily moved out the following week, and to this day, she refuses to live in an apartment with a ventilation panel inside the closet.
Sometimes the scariest part of a horror story isn't seeing a monster. It's realizing that the thing you were afraid of was completely human. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe to Harbon 2.0 for more original horror stories. And remember, if you're ever alone at night and you hear something inside your house, don't assume you're imagining it. You might not be.